Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 24th of April. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with the very latest weather situation in your community and village by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. That'll get you the very latest information by clicking on your county or zone. You'll get the forecast, current weather observations, linked to satellite and radar imagery, and the latest watches, warnings, and advisories. You can give us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391 or use your NOAA Weather Radio. Find information between the Alaska Weather shows on Twitter, on Facebook, and at YouTube at NWS Anchorage or NWS Fairbanks, or just search for AKWX TV. That will get you the full broadcast of what you're watching right now a little bit later on in the evening. And you can also go to alaskapublic.org, our broadcast partner here, and look for the current broadcast on the right side of the screen if you scroll down just a little bit. So many ways to stay up to date on the latest goings on with Alaska weather. The spring flood potential created on Monday is still something we'll continue to show until breakup really gets going here, but wanted to remind everyone that below average flooding potential is what's predicted for south central and southwestern Alaska, including Kodiak and the Kuskokwim Valley. Up north, though, a little bit of a different story, mainly north of the Brooks Range summits, but it does include areas along Kotzebue Sound out toward Red Dog Mine. No major flooding potential that we're seeing anywhere as indicated by the dots. You can stay up to date with this by going to weather.gov/APRFC. That's Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center for short. Or, of course, look at the breakup map, and you can track this as things really get going. And they're starting to show some signs of change around the Copper River Basin. We're noticing some jams there, as reported by the Wrangell St. Elias Park area. And, of course, up around Nikolai, the water's opened up there, so we're seeing some changes there. And in the middle Tanana, all the snow is gone on the ground now, as reported by the Fairbanks National Weather Service Forecast Office. So changes are probably about this close to really starting to move. And we'll continue to bring you these updates every night right here on Alaska Weather. And you can always track those updates for yourself, probably several times during the day as well, by going to weather.gov/APRFC. And a lot of this information that the state of Alaska and the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center will be using and putting on the map comes from you. So if you're along the Kuskokwim and the Yukon especially, if you are involved with River Watch, great, thank you very much. If you're not, find out from your community members and elders how to participate with that and communicate with the state and the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center so that we can share your information of what you're seeing on the ground in your part of your village along your river, so that we can help keep many other villages safe up and down the rivers in Alaska. So again, it is up to you a little bit about how much information actually makes it on this map, and thank you for doing what you do. Here's a look at the fire danger as of today. Still watching areas along probably Delta Junction to about, well, let's say North Pole up toward around Fairbanks there. Areas right there north of the Alaska Range in the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, still pretty dry. And with the snow gone now, this is an important time of the year to remember that fire danger is growing fairly quickly, and it looks like the fire season is probably starting a little bit earlier than normal. This could be a bad fire year, so use extreme precautions if you must do any burning at all, and check with local officials there to make sure burning is okay in your community. Looking out to the west and around the southern Bering Sea, you can see we're still looking at a southerly flow working its way up into Bristol Bay. Just south of the chain, several waves of low pressure are coming in behind, the latest push of moisture working across the North Pacific. And there's another impulse showing up on the eastern side of Asia. They're not quite to Beijing, but that may have some impacts for us in the weeks ahead. As we watch the last loop of this, you'll notice the circulation is just passing to the south and west of Unalaska. This will slowly work its way into the Gulf. Right now it's pushing an occluded front into the Bering Sea and into the Gulf of Alaska. Behind that, we'll keep some winds going across the central and eastern Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula, and those winds should be coming up tonight and into tomorrow toward Kodiak Island. On the front side of this is a much better chance of rain. On the back side of it, a little bit cooler. We'll see opportunities for mixed precipitation and a scattering of rain and snow showers across some parts of the southern and central Bering Sea. It still looks possible for snow across areas along eastern Russia all the way into the Bering Strait, but most areas up and down the west coast are going to remain dry with a more of an easterly or continental flow. Looking at the rest of the state, southeast today looked pretty dry and mild. Areas around Haines made it up to about 57 degrees today. Just a beautiful day in southeast, if not maybe a hair too warm for May, or April, I guess. It feels like May, doesn't it? Scattering of clouds, very thin ribbon along what used to be a frontal boundary, much like what we're seeing now out across the west, and it looks like history will repeat itself with this system here. Low pressure still south of the chain as it spirals northward. It's bringing that line of cloud cover across the Alaska Peninsula, and with that comes more of a healthier south and southeasterly flow, and it's latching onto some moisture. So perhaps by the end of the weekend, places like Kodiak could be looking at another 1 to 2 inches of rain. Well, that doesn't really help your fire season get going very much, but it does look like it could produce a healthy amount of water for you in the next 2 to 3 days. Some of that moisture will find its way to the Alaska Peninsula, and again, the winds will be picking up. Some areas in the east of Kodiak and the western Gulf, all the way south of Sandpoint, we'll be dealing with winds up to about 40 miles per hour or so in the coming days. Across the interior and the west coast, scattering of clouds. They're mostly fair weather clouds. Haven't seen a whole lot of showers showing up on the observations today. Many areas were dry. Another push of moisture coming across the Yukon and into the central and eastern interior is also mid and high level clouds. We did see a few areas of light rain, mainly south and Northway, maybe up to Northway itself this afternoon. Otherwise, dry weather all the way out toward the Seward Peninsula and the Bering Strait, and a little bit of sunshine there in Kotzebue Sound by late afternoon. Today's weather map shows that weak area of low pressure across the Copper River Basin. That's at about 1,003 millibars. Some spot showers there. Not much left across the Gulf of Alaska. Again, that's a remnant frontal boundary, much like what we saw coming our way a couple days ago across the central Pacific. This is working its way eastward and will likely have the same result, as I said. An occluded front is sitting right along the Aleutians. Ahead of that, some stronger winds and a little bit of light rain as that moves south and eastward just a hair tonight. The focus for precipitation will remain south and west of Kodiak and out toward Sandpoint. Maybe some heavier rainfall there. Nothing too dramatic, but it does look like it'll pick up a little bit more as you get closer to the low. A few showers possible across the south central coastline, including Kodiak Island, up toward western parts of Prince William Sound and the eastern Kenai Peninsula. Once you get up into the higher terrain, it's possible you might see a little bit of that rain mix in with snow, but no major accumulations are likely. And across southeast, things look fairly dry tonight, exceptions being areas closer to Hyder, where you might see a chance for some showers there today. Farther north still, periods of rain and snow are possible in shower form across the eastern parts of the Brooks Range and into the interior. For Friday, look for a few showers around Fairbanks and points east, south, and west. Looking at some opportunities for showers there, again with a little bit of instability thanks to frontal boundary passing mainly to your south of Kodiak Island. Some of the heavier rainfall will start to pick up as you get more of a direct flow in from the south and east. A few areas of rain and snow showers across south central, again mainly over the higher terrain before you see any of that mixing. It's still pretty warm out there. Southeast is looking at mainly clear sky, including Juneau tomorrow, another warm day for you. And out across the west, central, and western parts of the chain, still looking at opportunities for low clouds and rain as the trough is sitting just to your north, and a scattering of rain and snow showers across the central and western Bering with high pressure west of the Gulf of Anadyr. By Saturday, low pressure is starting to fall apart. It's sitting across the central and western Gulf. The pressure level is rising, meaning it's weakening somewhat. We don't have our occlusion or our front that's fully intact anymore. Instead, we just have a shift in the wind direction here, and the overall temperature pattern here is really starting to merge together and fan out. So we don't really have any sharp contrast anymore, which removes some of the opportunities for lift. However, in the upper atmosphere, we still have a wave of storm energy, let's say, working its way from southwest to northeast. And with that, continues the threat for some coastal showers all the way out towards southeast. Places like Juneau, Sitka, northward toward Yakutat, looking at a slightly better chance of rainfall there. There will be some holes in that precipitation down toward the Dixon entrance and Haida Gwaii, so we'll watch for that to kind of pass through from time to time. The Alaska Peninsula, we'll see a wind shift there, more of a north and easterly direction shaping up, and enough colder air is working in that the central and western part of the chain we'll start to see diminished chances of precipitation, but as that transition happens, you could see rain and snow showers instead of just plain old rain. South Central, again, some of the higher terrain looking at rain and snow showers, and areas along the upper Yukon Valley, probably seeing at least a taste of some light rainfall as we start up the weekend. Temperatures today, pretty mild stuff again across southeast, upper 40s to lower 50s. Ketchikan, Annette, Hyder all in the upper 50s. 50 around Juneau, 49 up around Skagway this afternoon, 42 in Yakutat, low to mid 40s across Prince William Sound. Kenai was 48, Homer and Seward very close to 50 degrees today, 50 in Anchorage, 49 around Talkeetna, Glen Allen about the same, 39 in Northway, with Fairbanks looking at temperatures in the low to mid 50s. Tanana was 46, Eagle 44, 39 at Fort Yukon. Farther north still around Anaktuvuk Pass, right at 30 degrees. Teens and 20s for the Arctic coast, 17 in Barrow, 23 in Kaktovik. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, chillier 10 degrees, 20 around Wainwright, at 34 degrees around Point Hope. Kotzebue Sound temperatures closing in on 40 degrees for Kivalina today. Shishmaref was 27, Nome 46. Norton Sound temps in the upper 30s to lower 40s. Around Ammonik it was 37. St. Lawrence 28. Nunivak Island saw temperatures in the upper 30s with Bethel at 51 degrees. Looked like a little bit closer to Grayling. It was 46, 49 around Galena. South and west, a little bit closer to that 50-degree mark again for Bristol Bay. King Salmon right there on the money. Mid to upper 40s for a good part of the Alaska Peninsula. Lower 40s for Kodiak Island. 37 in Unalaska. 40 for both St. Paul and St. George, and the central and western chain in the upper 30s to about 43 there in Atka. South Central temperatures overnight mainly above freezing, 34 degrees in Anchorage, around Whittier, about 34, 36 in Cordova. Southeast looking at temperatures from the low 30s around Juneau and northward to the upper 30s around Ketchikan, Annette, and Heidelberg. Around Kodiak, 38. The chain also looking at temperatures above freezing tonight, even St. Paul at 34, 32 in Nunivak Island, and north of the Brooks Range, single digits and teens. One of the colder spots around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Looks like most areas north of the Yukon to the Brooks Range will be in the upper 20s. Fairbanks 33, Tanana upper 20s, and Galena closer to 30 degrees with Unalakleet around 34. High temperatures tomorrow look to be some of the warmest around the Yukon Valley all the way out toward the YK Delta. Upper 40s and lower 50s will do it for areas north of the Alaska Range. You'll also see a little bit more heat around the Susitna Valley. Lower 50s there north and west of Wasilla and Palmer and up into the hills. As you get into southeast, look for a low to mid 50s tomorrow. A beautiful day there in the southeastern part of the state. Upper 40s around Prince William Sound, mid 40s for Kodiak again, expecting rain by the end of the day, and low to mid 40s for the chain and the Alaska Peninsula with 39 in Shemya, 30 in St. Lawrence, and Bristol Bay and Dillingham, King Salmon probably just barely making it into the upper 40s to about 50 degrees. Flying weather is going to change a little bit more across the western Gulf as we head into the weekend. So if you're restricted there to VFR, you might want to get some flying done quickly in the morning tomorrow. Otherwise, Kodiak Island, expect IFR to develop by late afternoon. MVFR conditions outside of Prince William Sound to the Hitchenberg entrance and the western or the eastern coastline of eastern Prince William Sound. Let me try that again. The eastern coastline of the Kenai Peninsula and the western parts of the Gulf of Alaska. Now, does that make sense? I hope so. Across the eastern side of Russia and the western parts of the Bering Strait, and you're looking at reduced visibility, let's say, especially for the western half of St. Lawrence Island, and a good part of the central and eastern Aleutians looking at least MVFR conditions, if not IFR at times. So here's your past conditions. Things are changing now, not just severe clear all the way around. IFR conditions there across the northern entrance for Anaktuvuk Pass, but otherwise VFR through the pass and southward. Same goes for Adigan Pass. Should see some improvements as we head into the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should start at MVFR tomorrow, but some conditions will improve throughout the day. Rainy Pass also leaning toward VFR conditions as we go through your Friday afternoon. And now as you go out eastward, Windy Pass and also Isabel Pass should be looking at VFR conditions through most of Friday. Tanita Pass still looks pretty good. Portage Pass by and large should be okay, but you're going to have some pockets of MVFR across western parts of Prince William Sound, so keep that in mind. Things may not be all the way clear all the way through. Chilkoot and White Pass likely VFR continuing through your Friday. Freezing levels, we still see some elevated warmth across the eastern parts of the Beaufort Sea, and we still have some warmer air across the northern parts of the YK Delta into Norton Sound and the southern parts of the Seward Peninsula, and also across the southern parts of southeast with levels as high as 4,000 feet, and even farther south they climb up to 6,000 feet. And that surface freezing line being punched very hard up to the north across the lower and even middle Yukon Valley. So some big changes there thanks to that storm sitting across the North Pacific. Freezing levels and icing potential, of course, work hand in hand. Below 8,000 feet, but above 5,000 feet, you'll run into some light to isolated moderate icing across southwest, including Kodiak Island, maybe some pockets of occasional moderate, and across the northern Yukon Valley, or the eastern Yukon Valley, and the eastern parts of the Brooks Range, below 10,000 feet, but above 4,000 feet for most areas, looking at light to isolated moderate there, also around Eagle down toward Northway. The jet stream shows that low pressure out across the Bering still firmly in control. That's driving that storm track well to our south and right into the Pacific Northwest. What do we get? Continental air, very dry air, and that's keeping things pretty stable across a large part of Alaska. But when I say stable, I don't mean things aren't going to happen. It simply means that we're warming up. The weather pattern itself is really kind of locked in place for right now. But we are heating up, and with any moisture that sneaks in, we're starting to get those clouds bubbling up, and that is certainly not a stable condition. It's one a lot more like summertime around here. So if you're noticing more of those summery changes, that is exactly why. 9,000 feet of southerly flow working its way up from the Gulf of Alaska. 30 to 45 knot winds on the eastern side of the low. Look at this, 80 knot flow there south of that low pressure system. The winds fall off fairly quickly as you run up the west coast, 10 to about 15 knots, and very light winds across the interior and mostly across southeast, mainly across the inner waterways, about 15 knots there from the south and southeast. A similar story at 3,000 feet, some of the fastest winds across the south and eastern side of the low. Some of the winds just east and south of the Kenai Peninsula all the way up to 60 knots. So watch for some turbulence in this region. Look for 20 to 50 knot winds across Bristol Bay, and winds coming from the central and eastern parts of the chain running around 50 knots or so, generally from the north and northwest. Turbulence potential, there is some below 11,000 feet then, especially across Bristol Bay out toward Kodiak Island. You can expect at least occasional moderate in some areas there. And along the ridge tops of the Alaska Range and through some of the passes, you could run into some light chop. Also across the central and western chain, hit and miss below about 10,000 feet, and across the west coast, at least some light to isolated moderate chop in the vicinity of a trough of low pressure. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Follow the arc to Arcturus and hit a spike to Spica.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Plot Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're going to do a little star hopping this week and discover new stars and constellations. Our jumping off point will be the Big Dipper.
The Big Dipper, the most recognizable star pattern visible most of the year, will be your guide to the heavens. First, it'll point us to the North Star.
Then show us the way to the bright orange star Arcturus.
Then lead us to the brilliant blue star Spica.
And we'll even meet a planet along the way.
Let's show you.
Okay, we have our April skies set up to 10 p.m. facing northeast, where we see the Big Dipper high above the North Star. If its cup was full of water, it'd be pouring right into the Little Dipper and overflowing onto the ground below.
If we shoot an arrow through the two stars on the end of the Big Dipper's cup and continue that line, it'll run smack dab into the North Star.
Now, let's use the Big Dipper's handle to find two more wonderful stars and a planet. Simply draw an imaginary line through the handle of the Big Dipper and extend it out along the curve or arc, and you'll arc your way to the bright star Arcturus.
So in other words, repeat after me. Follow the arc to Arcturus.
Follow the arc to Arcturus. Hey, that's pretty catchy.
Thanks. Just a little something I came up with. Arcturus is the brightest star in the constellation Boötes the Herdsman.
His outline looks more like a narrow kite.
Or an ice cream cone on its side.
Look out, Dean. That scoop of ice cream is falling on you. After you arc to Arcturus, keep going. Straighten out the arc a bit, and to the right, you'll run into the bright blue star called Spica. Spica is the brightest star in the constellation Virgo the Maiden. She's standing upright and covers most of the eastern sky. Is there a catchy saying to find Spica?
Of course. First, we follow the arc to Arcturus, then hit a spike to Spica.
Wow, that's a lot less catchy.
Yeah, I know, but maybe it's so bad you'll remember it anyway. Let's compare Arcturus and Spica to our star, the Sun. Arcturus is relatively close to us, only 37 light years away. Spica is about 7 times farther, at around 261 light years. The Sun, on the other hand, is only 8 light minutes away.
Now, let's size these three stars up. The sun is about 865,000 miles in diameter. That's large enough for 109 Earths to stretch end to end across its width.
But that's nothing compared to Spica, which is over 7 times wider than our sun, and Arcturus, which is over 25 times wider. This arc to Arcturus and spike to Spica trick works every spring, but this year we have something extra. You're probably wondering about that extra point of light above Spica. It's really bright and a little red. So let's follow the arc to Arcturus, spike to Spica, and then motor up to Mars.
The red planet. You've probably noticed Mars in the evening sky, rising in the east after sunset. Not only does it have a distinctive color, but it doesn't twinkle as much as the stars do. Earlier this month, Mars was at its closest point to the Earth, but now the Earth is slowly leaving Mars behind. Even though Mars is almost 60 million miles away, you'll still be able to see it in the evening skies for the rest of 2014.
Since Mars is a planet, it wanders around the background stars. It just happens to be in the right place this year to crash our arc to Arcturus and spike to Spica party, and adds a little extra spice to your evening stargazing.
So, this spring, get outside and let the Big Dipper be your guide.
The 2 stars on the end of the spoon will take you to the North Star.
And the curved stars in the handle will let you arc to Arcturus,
hit a spike to Spica,
and motor up to Mars.
And as you spin around the galaxy this week, remember to
keep looking up.
Time for your marine weather forecast across southeast. A light northerly flow continues across the Lynn Canal. It doesn't look a whole lot better than it is today. A 10-knot wind with a 2-foot sea there. Light winds more from the northeast across Stevens Passage, and more of a southeasterly flow coming up from the southern inner waterways. We've got an offshore wind developing tomorrow. That'll keep winds around 10 to 15 knots blowing from east to west with 6 to 7 foot seas across coastal areas all the way from Yakutat down toward Craig. As we get into Saturday, that flow will pick up though, looking at 25 to 30 knot winds coming from the east to west across coastal regions and seas up to 12 to 14 feet. Winds across the inner waterways for most areas are going to stay about the same for Saturday, around 10 knots or so, but look at that southeasterly flow picking up, and with that comes an increased threat for some rain showers, especially around Hyder, down toward Ketchikan, Metlakatla, and probably Annette as well. Maybe some of the coastal areas out toward Craig. So watch for some changes with that southeasterly wind. As we get into Friday, a southeasterly flow picking up a little bit more for the north and western Gulf, 25 to as high as 40 knots east of Kodiak. And again, with that comes certainly some rain and wind with that. 15-foot seas are expected across the west and southern parts of the Gulf. Inside Prince William Sound, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 15 to 20 knots there. And easterlies west of the Barren Islands and into Shelikof Strait at 35 knots with 10 to 11-foot seas. Northeasterlies running down Cook Inlet all the way into Shelikof Strait, 20 to 35 knot winds with 10-foot seas building out across the western sections of the Barren Islands to the coast and also through Shelikof Strait. 40 knot winds coming into Resurrection Bay and south of Seward, the eastern Kenai Peninsula and into the Barren Islands with 17-foot seas there. Seas diminish and winds diminish a little bit east of Kodiak and also in through Prince William Sound. You'll see increasing winds and waves, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea outside of Prince William Sound, an easterly flow up to 35 knots now with a 16-foot sea on Saturday. Easterlies coming across the Alaska Peninsula on Friday with an opposing flow there south of Sandpoint into King Cove. Look for 40-knot winds there south of Kodiak Island, 30 knots on the Bering Seaside with 6 to 9-foot seas on Friday, and then a little bit more of a shift there as we get into Saturday. Again, following that storm as it works its way across. Look for a northeasterly flow inside Bristol Bay and north of the Alaska Peninsula, also south of Kodiak Island, 20 to 30 knots with 7 to 9-foot seas on the Bering side, 15-foot seas south of Chignik and Kodiak Island, more of a northwesterly flow outside of Sandpoint and King Cove with a 16-foot sea on the Pacific side. For Friday in the Aleutians, a north and westerly wind sweeping across. The strongest winds will be on the Pacific side, 30 to 40 knots at times, 15 to 30 knots from Adak all the way out toward Unalaska with 6 to 9-foot seas there. Some higher seas out around Kiska with a westerly wind at 30 knots. As we get into Saturday, it becomes more northwesterly with time. 25 to 30 knot winds in all regions. Looking for 7 to 9 foot seas on the Bering side and 10 to 15 foot seas there, as high as 15 feet as you get south of Nikolsky and Unalaska. Across the west coast, a northeasterly wind out of the Bering Strait and Norton Sound, 15 to 25 knot winds by the time you get down to the Pribilofs. Again, most areas south of Nunivak Island are ice-free at this point. You can check the latest conditions anytime by going to weather.gov/Alaska and look for Ice Desk on the left-hand side of your screen. An easterly flow west of Cape Newenham, 30 knot winds with an 8-foot sea, and by Saturday you should see very minimal changes as we go across the west coast. A variable flow around Nunivak Island, seas maybe as high as 1 foot, so pretty flat there. Northerly flow around the Pribilofs and a northwesterly wind still fairly light around St. Matthew with a 3-foot sea. Now across the Arctic coast, winds will be primarily blowing out of the east and still over ice at about 10 to 15 knots. Look for many areas to see fog as we get into Friday there, so not a whole lot of very good visibility. Some of that could be below a mile at times, especially north of Barrow and Deadhorse. Northeasterlies around Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. An easterly flow inside of Kotzebue Sound diminishes to 10 knots by Saturday. Winds very light there west of Cape Lisburne. And an easterly flow still up to 20 knots around Kaktovik, but it diminishes as you head out toward Barrow and Point Lay by Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, spotty areas of showers over the higher terrain, kind of like a late spring day for many. Coastal showers, some of that mixing in with snow across some of the higher terrain, but otherwise southeast looks pretty dry there. Low pressure moving across the eastern Aleutians at 975 millibars will stir up the winds out ahead of it and bring in some rain to some coastal areas and especially into Kodiak as we get into Friday and Saturday. Some areas by the end of the weekend across Kodiak Island could be looking at as much as 1 to 2 inches of rainfall there, so the fire weather conditions ease somewhat, but it does look to be fairly soggy. Coastal areas also looking at showers inside of Prince William Sound across southwest, and windy conditions continue for the central and eastern chain and the Alaska Peninsula while southeast stays dry. That's a look at your Alaska weather forecast. We'll see you again right here tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.